Okay, great. First live stream. Hi everybody. This is going to be a very short tutorial on how to use Spoke. So you need to go to the Mozilla Hub's website. You need to sign in, ideally. Click on Spoke. And then you make a new project. So you can see here I've been doing a lot of things. It's a great way to start with one of these examples here. Basically, they've brought in some 3D model as a kind of background. Just a little tip here, so you get one page on the featured tab if you like, and if you click on all, you'll get a lot more. So you can have a good browse through these things, and there's actually several pages. So you can see it's, in this case, it's just loading up here. And what I'm going to do just now is just use one of the standard ones. Outdoor meetup. It takes a couple of seconds to load in. Sorry, I've just moved that around. Alright, so it loads in. First of all, you need to figure out how to move yourself around. So hold down left mouse button will orbit around, and more useful for me is holding down the right mouse button and you can basically look around. And if you use W and A for forwards and backwards, W and S, sorry, A and D for left and right, you can move anywhere you want, and you can use Shift to zoom in. So there's a few key things about Spoke. Basically, you need an environment, which is this combination of 3D models which have been brought in here. So there's a roof, there's the mountains in the background on one object. So you can compose environment as you want. You just need to bring in these assets. The other thing that I'm going to show in this already created scene is that there are some waypoints and spawn points. So you need one spawn point, otherwise your avatars won't be able to come in. These are waypoints that have the spawn point checkbox enabled, which means they act as spawn points. And there's a few other important options there. So occupiable means that you can effectively teleport to them, and clickable means that if you're in this space in hubs and you hold down your space bar and point at them, you can teleport into that space. The other thing that's really important is that you can actually scale these. So if you want to play with scale and be bigger in this world, you can scale up your avatars, and you will actually, in VR you'll feel it of course, but you won't really notice it so much in 2D mode. Yeah, so you saw there basically how you manipulate objects. So you can either move them by dragging one of these arrows here, and these planes just work on a plane, and it's set up to snap to a grid of 0.5 meters here. You can turn that off of course, and then you have smooth moving around, which is really good. Or you can turn that down to 0.1 meter. So that's what this grid that you can see in there, and you can have a much more fine movement around the world. But it's pretty useful to use your grid there, of course. You don't see the grid when you're in the space. So that's just something I wanted to show you while I've got some objects in the space. What I'm going to do is make a new one completely from scratch. So I can go to the top left here, do File, New Project. It basically says I'm going to lose what I've got there. New empty project. I think even the empty project comes in with some objects there as well. Sorry, I've got this web camera on today on my laptop and not on my desktop. So let's do an example where we start with pretty much nothing. So skybox, you want to keep in there. That just gives you this image that looks like your sky. Directional light you want to keep in there, and the spawn point you want to keep in there. So this is basically where you appear when you come into the world. So the way that I usually do things here is through elements, which are some predefined objects you can bring into the space, and my assets. So you're going to start to want to upload objects as assets into this world. So when you're in the My Assets tab, you can click here Upload. You can upload images, videos up to 128 megabytes, 3D models up to 128 megabytes, but you're going to want highly optimized models so that they'll work in a mobile scene. So here's a boat which I brought in. I bought this actually on Sketchfab. It's a houseboat actually. Typical thing that happens is you bring it in. So again, I'm going to right click and zoom out from this, and the scale will be wrong. So you can see this one is at least 100 times too big. So what I do is when that object's selected, I go there, make it a little bit more realistic size, and I've gone to too many zeros. So there we go, it's 100th of the size. And then you need to move it around onto your origin here. You can see there the Y0. And look for my spawn point. Try and get these two things to be close together. So this is going to be an environment that I want my avatar to go inside. And now I can see that it's actually was only 10 times too big. Yeah, not quite. Still needs to be smaller. 0.05, for example. That looks about right. So unfortunately, when you take models from the 3D sites like Sketchfab, they're all going to be different sizes. So that's how you can take a model, a predefined model, and use it as an environment. If you have collidable on, basically the avatar will not move past it. If you have walkable, you can use the teleport functionality to teleport onto anywhere on the floors or even up the stairs. This actually has an upstairs and a downstairs. This is obviously a non-textured one. I've got other models in there with textured. You need to play around with them to get them to come in. You can even bring in photogrammetry models as long as it's .glb binary. You can use it in spokes and hubs. Just to show you some of the other things you can bring in 2D images very easily. So they just pop in like that. You can use the Q and E keys to turn them around. You can scale them just by dragging over the letters here. If you click on that chain, it turns off the uniform scale, so then you can scale in one direction. And you can see there that it's actually brought this in pretty much against that plane because I dragged it in against the mesh there. So the same thing, if I drag it in on the floor, it should at least position it down on the floor there. Yeah, if you want to delete things, you just click on the tree, hit delete. You can bring in sound, you can bring in 360 images. So for example, I'm going to bring in this wind turbine here. It's a 360 image from Google Street View. Usually these need to be a bit bigger, so I'm going to scale it up. And you can see by default it comes in flat, and you just need to change its projection to spherical. So spherical picture, let's have that effectively as a skybox. I'm going to make it a lot bigger, 10 times at least. And then basically you have the effect that when you're inside this model, it will look like that's your view, like that. So that's how I'm bringing in 360 content and 3D models. Sounds are the same. You have to convert them to a sound which is supported. All of these other tabs here are simply assets which are on the cloud for you to use. The Sketchfab one is just a filter of Sketchfab only showing .glb. So if it's not here but you find it in FBX or any other mesh format, you have to download it and convert it, which you can do with the 3D Paint tool that comes with Microsoft these days. The same for Google Poly. These are the .glb ones. Bing Images, Bing Videos just allows you to bring in again any content that's already on the cloud. But you can, as I said, upload things into your own little assets here. And that's it, really. That's how easy it is to use. Put in the objects that you want. Hubs and Spoke doesn't really give you much interactivity. It just allows you to create these scenes. You can import, as you can see here in Elements, waypoints. So these will allow you to teleport around. So of course I've just dragged that in. Default is a scale of 1 to 1, and that is now going to be a point that somebody can teleport into. And I just showed you previously that you can change the scale. Lighting doesn't work on Quests or mobile devices. It only works on PC or PC based browsing. Audio is obvious, video is obvious. A link, you can use this to bring in a portal to go to another hubs room. So don't forget, everything that you put in your Spoke editor will be permanently in your scene. You can also, of course, pin objects once you're in a scene in a hubs room, but use the Spoke editor if you want to put in things which are, parallel like this or placed with a little bit more accuracy. Yeah, and then you hit publish to hubs. The screenshot is generated from the view that you have when you hit that publish button. So make sure that you have your camera in a good position when you hit the publish, and then you're done. And then if you want to, of course, you can make it available to everybody as a Creative Commons room. I won't do that just because it's got an Aviva logo in it. And then you publish it, and it does a little test to tell you what is optimized and what not. A little bit of advice: it's highly optimized for very low-end mobile devices. So for example, here it says less than 50,000. You can run 1 million on an Oculus Quest, easily more than that when you're using a PC-based browser. And most of these you can actually go over the recommended limit without any major problem. This texture here is it's a very high resolution photograph, the spherical one, and that's why it's saying it's going to take up quite a lot of your video RAM. Again, I've had it up to a gigabyte. It depends what you're running it on. A gigabyte will run fine on my little netbook here. The lights, again, I've had in 10 or so on a PC. It runs fine. But just bear in mind, if you want it to run on the smallest of netbooks or small tablets, then you're going to have to optimize this stuff. You hit publish. It takes a while to upload any new assets that you might have, so that's it. And then you can view it in a hubs page. Create a room with this scene. Remember, of course, if you're logged in, you can save all this stuff. So the lobby, of course, camera's not in, and when I hit enter on screen, it's going to teleport me inside the room, where I have a little bit of intersecting the sphere, which is my sky box just now is intersecting. But there you can see, yeah, that 3D model is effectively navigable now. I actually can go up the stairs because walkable and physics is turned on. You might get it glitching out a bit there, so it's made a collision mesh around it. If I hit space bar, I forgot to make it clickable, but I did have a teleport position there. But that's the basics. If I hit G, I'll be able to fly out of it, and you can see what that scene looks like.